Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Sodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astatara Satasri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premananda All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 24, The Renunciation of Kardama Muni, Text 30. Svīyam, vākyam, ṛtaṁ, kartum, avatīrṇo me, gṛhe, cikīrṣur, bhagavān, jñānam, bhaktānām, māna-vardhanaḥ, svīyam vākyam ṛtam kartum, avatīrṇo me gṛhe, cikīrṣur bhagavān jñānam, bhaktānām māna-vardhanaḥ, svīyam vākyam ṛtam kartum, avatīrṇo me gṛhe, cikīrṣur bhagavān jñānam, bhaktānām māna-vardhanaḥ, svīyam vākyam ṛtam kartum, avatīrṇo me gṛhe, cikīrṣur bhagavān jñānam, bhaktānām māna-vardhanaḥ. Vaishnavis. Svīyam, your own. Vākyam, words. ṛtam, true. Kartum, to make. Avatīrṇaḥ, descended. Asi, you are. Me gṛhe, in my house. Cikīrṣuḥ, desirous of disseminating. Bhagavān, the personality of Godhead. Jñānam, knowledge. Bhaktānāṁ, of the devotees. Māna, the honor. māna-vardhanaḥ, who increases. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. Kardama Muni said, "You, my dear Lord, who are always increasing the honor of your devotees, have descended in my house just to fulfill your word and disseminate the process of real knowledge." Purport. When the Lord appeared before Kardama Muni after his mature yoga practice, he promised that he would become Kardama's son. He descended as the son of Kardama Muni in order to fulfill that promise. Another purpose of his appearance is cikīrṣur bhagavān jñānam, to distribute knowledge. Therefore, he is called bhaktānām māna-vardhanaḥ, he who increases the honor of his devotees. By distributing Sāṅkhya, he would increase the honor of his devotees. Therefore, Sāṅkhya philosophy is not dry mental speculation. Sāṅkhya philosophy means devotional service. How could the honor of the devotees be increased unless Sāṅkhya were meant for devotional service? Devotees are not interested in speculative knowledge. Therefore, the Sāṅkhya enunciated by Kapila Muni is meant to establish one firmly in devotional service. Real knowledge and real liberation is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage in devotional service. Om jñānaṁ gnānanjana shalakaya chakṣuranmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Srila Prabhupada is stressing in this purport real knowledge and is explaining that the Sāṅkhya philosophy enunciated by Lord Kapila, the son of Kardama Muni, is the real thing. And that it is meant to facilitate devotees becoming engaged in devotional service. So, the Sāṅkhya means counting, means enumerating the different elements. Part of devotional service is understanding sarvam kalpidam brahma. Everything is Krishna's energy. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. Everything is coming from me, Krishna says. Everything is my property. Ishavasyamidam sarvam. Everything is the property of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it's meant to be used in His service. So these are important understandings. We need to understand something about ontology. What is real in this world? What are the elements of which the universe, the world as we experience, is made of? So, Lord Kapila is giving that knowledge. There are basically 23 material elements, and then there's a spiritual element as well. That's us. Mamaivam so jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manasastan indriyani prakriti shnani karshati. The soul is an eternal part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. But, he says now, at the present moment, manasastan indriyani prakriti shnani karshati. Now we are in the realm of prakriti, and the soul is struggling with the different elements. So, in that verse in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna lists a few of the elements, but in the Sāṅkhya philosophy presented by Lord Kapila, he gives a more extensive list of the different elements that make up our reality as we experience it in the realm of Prakriti, the material energy. You know, the Lord has three principal energies. He has uncountable energies, but they're classified according to different systems. And a basic classification is the distinction between the spiritual energy, the material energy, and the marginal potency or energy. So, the spiritual energy is the energy by which Krishna manifests the spiritual worlds, the eternal spirit souls, his various expansions, and the material energy is the potency of the Lord that makes up the material realm, which is only part of the whole cosmic reality. Sometimes it's compared to like a little cloud that covers up a portion of the spiritual sky. So between the two is the marginal potency, which has, by exercise of its minute quantity of independence, is able to choose to exist either in the spiritual world or the material world. So this material world is made up of different elements. And the list of elements that's given in the Sāṅkhya philosophy is different than the list of elements that's given by the atheist or the materialist or the physicalist, as they're sometimes called. They would say what all that really exists is the chemical elements, which they believe are made up of different types of atoms, which are made up of different subatomic particles, which are made up of what they call quarks. But whatever they are, they're simply the material elements that are listed in the periodic table of elements that physics students study in college or high school physics classes. So, but in addition to those elements, you know, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, all the iron, gold, aluminum, all these different elements, there are other elements. In the Sāṅkhya philosophy, there are the five Mahabhutas, the five principal elements: earth, air, water, fire, ether. And somebody might say, well, where are, you know, the elements of modern physics? You know, the oxygen, the hydrogen, the helium, all of that. Where is that? Well, it's in a sense, actually included in those 5 elements, which correspond to different states of matter in modern physics. They would say there are solids, liquids, gases, and there's space is the element ether. So those kind of correspond, the 5 Mahabhutas: earth, water, air, fire, ether. They correspond to those different states of matter that are recognized by modern physics. So there are some parallels, but one thing that modern science fails to do is explain consciousness, mind, intelligence, and how those things come from their material elements. They don't have any explanation. But in the Sāṅkhya system, that is included. Actually, the material elements, according to the Sāṅkhya system, they develop one after the other from sense objects. They're the sense objects: taste, sound, touch, all the material elements come from the sense objects, which are there in the beginning of creation. And not only the sense objects are there, the senses are also ingredients. They're part of the kit of elements. Like if you get a kit for a computer or some other device, as sometimes has been done, if you don't have in the kit all the parts, you're never going to get the function of what you're trying to put together if you don't have all the parts. So it's like today's scientists are working with a kit that is missing a lot of the parts, so they can never put the parts that they have together in such a way that you get consciousness, sensation, all of that. It remains a mystery to them. And I know that for a fact because recently, a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, I went to a major international conference on the science of consciousness, and prominent scientists there admitted we don't have any explanation for any of the things that we experience in the world: the taste of an apple, the color of an apple. We have millions of experiences every day, and we can't explain one of them. So how can it be said that we have a science of consciousness? But the Sāṅkhya philosophy has all the elements, all the pieces of the puzzle, all the parts of the kit that are necessary to assemble an understanding of our actual position in this world. So there are the pancha jnanendriyas and the pancha karmendriyas, the 5 working senses and the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. The knowledge acquiring senses are the eyes for seeing, the ears for hearing, the nostrils for smelling, the tongue for tasting, the skin for touching, and the working senses are the voice for speaking, the arms for organizing, the legs for moving around, the organs of generation, reproduction, and the organs for evacuating waste products from the body. So it's an interactive system. We're getting knowledge from through our senses, and we're able to use our working senses to interact with the elements of the environment, the material environment, the little virtual reality system that Krishna has created for us. And in addition to those sense objects, the 5 sense objects, the 5 mahabhutas, the 5 elements, and the 10 senses, that's 20 elements. Then there's mind, intelligence, and false ego. So that's 23, and beyond that, there's the soul, which we could call the 24th element. And it is the presence of the soul only that allows the whole thing, the whole apparatus to be conscious. But if we're conscious only of the material elements and not conscious of the real self, the soul, and its relationship with Krishna, then it's false consciousness. We're involved in a fantasy conception of ourself and a fantasy world. And that never satisfies the real self. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimuratma kartaham iti manyate. Bewildered by false ego, one believes that the material body, which presents itself to our contaminated consciousness, is the real self, is the real doer. But nothing that is experienced on that basis is anything other than temporary and mixed with all kinds of unpleasant experiences. And this is why Srila Prabhupada is expressing the importance of knowledge in devotional service. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, "Bhaktyā mam abhijananti yavanyaschasmi tatvata tato mam tatvato gyatva vichate tadanantaram." This bhaktyā, by devotional service, what is the result of devotional service? That I am known in truth. Tattva means the real truth, not some false truth. Of course, the two things are contradictory. It's just illusion. But the illusion of being the independent enjoyer of whatever exists in our field of consciousness is a truth. It's produced by the Sāṅkhya elements, ultimately, where consciousness is given the opportunity to either identify with a temporary, and in that sense, false body, and a temporary and false field of activities. False in the sense that it's temporary and ultimately unsatisfying, and it's not the real truth. So that kind of knowledge is required, and Kardama Muni is giving it. for many people in this world, under the influence of the ideas that are being promoted in the education systems all over the world, they think that, well, we're just here in this world, don't know how we got here. Maybe we'll figure it out someday, how chemicals combine to form the first living thing. Obviously, it had to happen that way. We don't have it all figured out, but we will eventually do it. And we're just here with whatever's available to enjoy ourselves, with whatever paraphernalia we can develop, with our technology, with our understanding of matter. This is the result of the atheistic kind of Sāṅkhya, which doesn't recognize the existence of the real elements in this, even in this material world. So it's like, I've given the example sometimes. If you go, you're a guest in somebody's house, you wake up, you find yourself in somebody's house, and then you start using everything, for your own purposes, without taking into consideration the owner of the house and the fact that you're just a guest, and you're welcome to use whatever the owner has allotted for your use. I mean, it's kind of just standard Ishavastamidam Sarvam philosophy given in the Upanishad, that we should be aware that everything around us in the material world is the property and energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that we're here as guests. We should be able to see everything in its proper relationship to the owner, and then use only what's allotted for us for our purpose. And what is our purpose? To become self-realized, to become God-realized, and in that way experience real relationships. Like Kardama Muni is experiencing a real relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore he's going to be completely satisfied. He's going to be completely fulfilled in all of his desires. His honor is going to be increased by his real relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we're seeing his explanation of that here. How, yes, you appeared to me before, you promised something, and now you're going to give it, and it's going to be a great thing for me, my wife, this whole world, really. So that is real relationship. In this material world, we experience only shadow relationships, phantasmagoria. Our concept of self is a fantasy. We imagine, I imagine, I am this material body, born in 1948, and I am this and I am that. In a short time, it's going to be gone. And for everyone in the material world, even Lord Brahma, with his lifetime of 300 trillion years, it's really just a flash, a short time in connection with eternity. And therefore, these shadow relationships that we develop in the phantasmagoria of the material world are not ultimately going to be satisfying. They aren't going to be fulfilling. But the relationship with Krishna, once that is awakened, the Krishna, I was reading in a purport from some verses earlier in the second canto, where Srila Prabhupada was explaining that Krishna is the reservoir of and the ultimate source of all affectionate relationships. And he said in his purport, Krishna is the full, naked, uncontaminated object of affection. And the strength of that affection is a measure of the reality of the relationship, the reality of the connection of the soul with the Supreme Soul, Krishna. So once that relationship is established, I think it's interesting that he used the word naked. That word is used by Srila Prabhupada many times in many senses to express the reality of something, the naked truth of material reality, the naked truth of our material desires. It becomes exposed when one begins to become self-realized. And and he also makes the point, it's a little, but he says, like, if people want to enjoy sense gratification, they want to get naked. It's kind of a crude example, but he gives it. He says, it's like if you want to enjoy your senses, your real senses, not the false material senses, you have to remove the material covering. Sarvo padi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchite. So sarvapati vinirmuktam, you have to remove the external material covering. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunai. The love for Krishna, Prema, is eternally there in the heart. It just has to be brought out by the process of devotional service, which is accompanied by knowledge, real knowledge. Like Srila Prabhupada's name, Bhaktivedanta. Yes, bhakti must be there, but not sentimentally. Vedanta, with conclusive knowledge. It has to be there. So we are followers of Bhaktivedanta. We want to cultivate devotional service to Lord Krishna, but with Vedanta, with full understanding, supported by knowledge coming from the Vedas. Vedeshu sarvaraham eva vedyo, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. By all the Vedas, by all the Vedic literatures, I am to be known. So I'll stop there. Brigapati Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. You mentioned earlier in the talk about you went to the convention and the scientists were openly admitting they didn't understand. They didn't have a science for consciousness. So my question is, what's keeping them from accepting a body of knowledge which explains consciousness and is supported by a significant amount of empiric evidence, which they're probably aware of, and offers a process for internal verification. It's not just, something they have to just accept and that's the end of it. What's preventing them from taking that step? And
science is a game that's played according to certain rules. Just like devotional service, you could say, is a game that's played according to certain rules. Their set of rules by which they carry out their scientific work includes the rule you can't bring in any kind of supernatural control by God. You have to explain everything by matter operating according to known physical laws. And you can't bring anything in that is non-material, like a non-material soul, for example. Even though it will explain phenomena that you can't explain, they have, those are some of their rules. So some effort, I believe anyways, that part of the effort has to be to expand their ontology.
Good morning. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean? What does it mean to explain consciousness?
Well, a factual thing that we all experience is that we're conscious. If I weren't conscious and you weren't conscious, we wouldn't be having this experience, right?
So is it similar to self-awareness?
Excuse me?
Consciousness, is that idea similar to self-awareness? And perception of
consciousness is something that's self-evident. Can you tell that you're conscious?
Do you mean that you're not living an illusion?
Consciousness means like you have an experience. Like if you taste something, that's not just, in other words, there's something unexplained there. According to science, when you're having a perception, say like if you're seeing something, just means that there are light waves of a certain frequency that strike the cells in the retina of your eye and get transmuted into an electrical signal that can be measured, that goes from the cells in the retina to the optic nerve. It's carried to certain visual processing parts of the brain which become activated, and that can be detected by instruments. But that does not explain you're actually seeing anything, because all that's there is electrical signals and chemicals. There's nothing.
Oh. Is there a question as to why do we want to explain consciousness as opposed to just accept it as a self-evident fact of life?
Anyways, I think we'll have to have a discussion aside from this, because we're getting over the scheduled time for the class. But I'll just tell you that at the present moment, scientists themselves admit they have no explanation for consciousness. Conscious experience of colors, taste, sounds. if you have an explanation, you can give it to me.
Hare Krishna, beautiful class. Just I wanted to say what I understand means here, if the scientists were to accept the consciousness, that means they have to accept the presence of soul. So what they would not do it. Soul, presence of soul also means acceptance of God. So they would not do it. Because Prabhupada says that soul is both conscious and consciousness. So
That's right.
when we try to explain or understand consciousness from material platform, it is not possible actually. It comes from God to the soul, from soul to soul is consciousness. So the scientist who cannot do it. That is my understanding.
Yes, it's very important what you said. I often say it myself. The soul is conscious and is consciousness. Srila Prabhupada said that, and that is the ultimate understanding. Where does consciousness come from? It comes from the soul. Without the presence of the soul, all the electric signals and chemical transformations may be there, but you won't have consciousness. And that's the problem that they're struggling with. They've been struggling with it. I mean, 50 years ago, or no, 25 years ago, I was at a conference where they said, you know, in 25 years, we'll have this problem completely solved. And now, 25 years later, the same scientists are admitting we still don't have it. They'll never get it.
Yeah, one thing is what is known as science in this world is simple science, actually. Spiritual science is our Krishna consciousness. So it's different level of science. If the scientists accept this, there is higher level of science, para-vijñān, then they will understand their vijñān is dependent on para-vijñān, I guess so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is a science of consciousness where consciousness can be experienced, like if one takes up the process of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra seriously, then one can, it's like an experiment. You carry out the experiment and you see the result, experience the result. So if we do the experiment, then we can see. But it's like, you know, if you have one astronomer might be using an optical telescope to look at the sky. And he may see in a certain part of the sky nothing. But another astronomer using an X-ray telescope will look at the same empty, apparently empty portion of sky and see a source of X-rays. Now, the optical astronomer may be sitting there looking at the same piece of sky and see nothing, but the astronomer using the X-ray telescope may say, wow, there's a really fantastic object there. And the other astronomer may say, well, I don't see it, therefore it doesn't exist. And the other astronomer says, of course, you're not using the right instrument. You know, you won't see it using your optical telescope, but if you use the X-ray telescope, you'll see it. We said, no, I'm not going to do that. I only use my telescope. You know, so it's sort of the same thing. It's like we're saying, if you use the right instrument, the right procedure, you'll be able to perceive all these things. But no. We're going to play the game according to my rules. So I have to get them to change the rules. Hare Krishna. Sorry for going over time.